This horror story anthology is quite different from the videos I usually make. There's no spooky background music, no sound effects, and certainly no jump scares. This is just me sharing scary Halloween stories with you. So why don't you cozy up in bed and rest your eyes for tonight? But make sure the light always stays on. When Sam's mom told him numerous of times to put his clothes away, the old woman reached her limit of frustration. Sam was a 16-year-old young man spending most of his time outside the house. His homework was neglected, his chores were abandoned, and the support for his mom was at an all-time low. It became difficult for her to do everything around the house, especially with the death of her husband and eldest child. Sam was too young to understand at the time, therefore his actions, in his mind at least, were justified. One day he comes home late from school, then sees the pile of clothes on a single couch in his room. It was heaped up like a mess, and yet these clothes were ironed just a few days ago. Once again, after telling him to tidy up his room, Sam had turned a deaf ear. Later that night, however, he saw something rather frightening. When he was going to bed and upon switching off his bedside lamp, the pile of clothes resembled that of a person. A dark figure with no distinctive features. Sam felt his entire body freeze with fear. With each gulp of saliva, it became difficult to swallow any more. Reluctantly, he reaches for his lamp switch, turns on the light, and just sees the pile of clothes. Rather than putting his clothes away, he turns off his light. He walks towards the illusion of someone sitting on the chair, then brushes his hand against it. Clothes, he said. He picked up one of the t-shirts, then tossed it next to the pile. That night he slept peacefully without a care in the world. The entire week passes and he sees this mysterious, eerie, shadowy being sitting on his chair. Sam had eventually gotten used to it, speaking to the illusion, sharing his life's problems, then taunting it when he could. But towards the end of the week for the Halloween party, everything changed. While Sam was getting dressed in his room, he heard his name being called from outside the house. This voice sounded like his mom, therefore he answered, "Yes, Ma, what now?" No further response. Now, while this is common among mothers, calling out for you then keeping silent, Sam had this strange feeling of unease. The soft voice that he heard while belonging to his mother sounded more like a recording. 7 p.m. he walked outside, opened the door, and answered yes again. To his surprise, his mom walked in the lounge from her bedroom and asked Sam who was he talking to. The young man took his finger, stuck it in his ear, and wiggled it around. Maybe he was hearing things. Nevertheless, after getting dressed, Sam forgot to take the pumpkin that he carved and kept next to the pile of clothes, then left the house at 8 p.m., leaving his mom not only to tidy up the kitchen by her lonesome, but sort out everything else in the house. Sam returns at 2 a.m. slightly drunk. While wobbling towards the front door, struggling to find the keyhole, he sees an eerie shadow with white eyes, standing by the window staring at him, then disappears. He walked past his mom's bedroom and saw her sleeping with a book in her hand. The woman waited for him until she couldn't anymore. Gently, he closed the door, then made his way to his bedroom. Sam felt the internal dilemma of a drunk person. The room seemed to be spinning recklessly, and for the life of him, he just couldn't find the light switch. With his shoes and party clothes still on, Sam collapses on the bed in the same manner one would do after a long day's work. Sam stays still, hoping the room would stop spinning while breathing slowly, trying not to throw up. Just for a moment, he had forgotten about the pile of clothes until he glanced at the chair. The same dark, mysterious shadow sat idly by, wearing the carved pumpkin over its head. Sam slurred his speech and spoke to the shadowy figure the way that he always did. But maybe in his drunk state, he could not fathom on how the pumpkin, kept next to the pile of clothes, was now serving as a head for the shadow. However, when the mysterious person stood up and walked towards the bed, Sam sobered up instantly. This didn't seem like an illusion anymore. This felt real. With the room spinning round and round, the young man fidgets for his light switch, turning it off and on, realizing the light stopped working. His room became colder to the point of seeing the mist of his breath. He screams for his mom, yet no voice leaves his throat. He tries moving, yet his body remains stuck. The room door slams closed, locking itself, while the Halloween man floats towards Sam's bed, moving like a wavy shadow. He still believes it's an illusion. Maybe if he closed his eyes tight enough, then all of this would go away. It was just a heap of clothes after all. He had forgotten about the distant voice calling his name a few hours ago. He had forgotten he responded to the entity by saying yes to it. Worse, Sam opened the door and welcomed it inside. Although this man never believed in the supernatural, and yet he failed to notice the main thing. While this evil, mysterious, dark, shadowy entity wearing a pumpkin for a head crawls towards Sam on his bed, he whispers to himself, "You're not real. Mom, I promise I will put the clothes away first thing tomorrow morning." But if only Sam knew, for tonight at least, this wasn't an illusion. How could it be? When Sam's mom packed away the clothes when he was at the party. Halloween was celebrated and observed by every single resident in Hollow Avenue. These folk would have a competition of whose house would be decorated the best. With spooky house decorations came along appropriate outfits for the festive period, and for that, they needed Cedric. Cedric was a middle-aged man and the best tailor in the entire village. He worked in his home providing some of the most creative and unique outfits for Halloween at a reasonable price. He would work tirelessly during the month of October trying to top off the previous year's work. However, the tailor was the only one that knew about the dark secrets that haunted Hollow Avenue. He knew there was a monster that lurked nearby, stalking its prey when the full moon shines bright. This year for Halloween, the village folk wanted to wander the woods as ghosts, vampires, witches, and any other mythical creatures of the night, fitting for the festivity. How was Cedric going to convince them not to? Usually, during the month of October, the village folk would always stop by at Cedric's house to check on how their outfits were doing. They noticed that since the tailor moved into the village, he had always been taking injections. There was a small jar of liquid that Cedric always topped up for his daily shots. They called his ailment the sugar sickness, meaning diabetes. This Halloween, the tailor had no choice but to tell them the story about the werewolf roaming free at night. He warned them not to venture the woods, especially when there was going to be a full moon on October 31st. He urged them, no matter what happens, stay out of the woods that night. Although the village folk saw this as a challenge, they saw it as Cedric creating a really eerie atmosphere for their role-playing fantasy, not realizing the fear in his voice and eyes was very much real. When All Hallows Eve arrived, Cedric looked up at the sky and sighed in relief. Storm's coming, which means that it was overcast. Everyone cheered and made their way into the village woods. They all looked dashing with their outfits, and hats off to Cedric for doing such an amazing job. Although he would not be part of the fun, the sickness at his age always made him feel tired. Hence, when the tailor returned home, overjoyed and relieved that the monster wouldn't be seen in the woods tonight, he made a hot cup of tea before getting ready for bed. From his window, the village looked spectacular with Halloween decorations everywhere. The cloud cover with gentle rain really set the mood this year for Halloween. However, when the darkness fades away, Cedric's eyes widened. Slowly, the cloud cover disperses and the rain stops. Without hesitation and thought, Cedric storms out the house and runs into the woods. He yells at them, "Get out, go back to your homes and lock your doors." No one listens. The village folk smiled with excitement. They thought Cedric was really going all out this Halloween with his acting. However, when the clouds cleared up and the full moon shone bright, they realized this wasn't a game anymore. Cedric frantically looks around, witnessing the moonlight caress the woods. He sees how big and bright the full moon is tonight. He riffles through his pockets like an innocent man trying to prove his identity. When the sugar sickness was at an all-time high, it became easier disguising medication for other ailments. Cedric remembered why he wanted them out of the woods tonight, for his medicine was depleted. Cedric indeed had an ailment, but the sickness was the werewolf curse. His hazel eyes became covered by a dark yellow film. The bones of his shoulders pop out, piercing his skin. Cedric's jaw breaks while his gnarly fangs push out from his mouth. His nose dislocates while his snout grows long and pointy. Dark black fur covers his body like a rash while he falls to the ground moaning in pain. His voice sounded different, deep and resonant. The village folk screamed in horror, dropping their prop toys and sprinting for their lives. But they were so far into the woods, the way out towards the village seemed like an endless pathway. Then a long howl echoes in the woods, followed by a blood-curdling roar which instills fear in the hearts of many. Cedric the werewolf had lost his conscience. He chases down the village folk like a predator hunting its prey. With his sharp claws, he takes swipes at them, slicing their necks and ripping out chunks of their back. This Halloween massacre lasted for only a few minutes, yet it felt like an eternity. The horrifying and fearful screams were decreasing with each stride taken by the werewolf. Then the woods were silent. The werewolf begins ripping out flesh from the victims, chewing and then swallowing. Cedric looked rabid. This werewolf curse had turned him into a rage-driven, mindless beast, with a hunger that was not being satisfied. The dark clouds gather over the village once again, bursting with rain. Cedric passes out in the woods from the excruciating pain of turning back into a human. His eyes open at the break of dawn, witnessing the horror of what he has done. The sorrow and grief that he felt in this moment was worse than the physical pain of turning into a werewolf. He strolls aimlessly towards his home like a man without any feeling. He walks downstairs to his working area, finds a rope, and puts himself out of his misery. Now, even after 100 years, the new residents claimed the village was indeed haunted every Halloween. They see ghosts wearing spooky outfits running for their lives in the woods, being chased by a werewolf entity. There is no shortage of guided meditation, sleep hypnosis, and affirmation videos on YouTube. Personally, I have used some of them myself a long time ago. However, the common misconception about affirmations is that it takes effect overnight, when in reality it does take time to rewire your brain. Sometimes, however, your subconscious may store information that even you don't know about. Lauren had trouble sleeping for the past few weeks. Therefore, for the last week of October, she tried finding a soothing sleep meditation video on YouTube. Whiskers, Lauren's black cat, sat next to her on the bed, curious as to what his human was getting up to. And there it was, an 8-hour sleep hypnosis meditation with positive affirmations, 1 million views. Maybe the affirmations was a bonus, but Lauren just needed sleep. She cozies up in bed with Whiskers next to her as she presses play on the video. She keeps her phone on her bedside pedestal, closes her eyes, gets into a relaxing position, then lies still in bed. 8 hours later, Saturday morning, Lauren wakes up feeling groggy. How strange, she thought. Weren't these sleep hypnosis meditations supposed to make you feel rejuvenated in the morning? Why did she feel like she's been hit by a bus? Weirdly, she also notices scratch marks on her forearm and face. "Whiskers," she yelled, "what the hell is the matter with you?" The cat hissed at her and then walked away. Lauren was a light sleeper, then why didn't she feel Whiskers' scratches on her? Maybe the sleep hypnosis thing was actually working. For the entire day, the tiredness became stronger. Lauren felt like a living zombie. Her eyes were heavy, the scratches burned, and her body felt exhausted. Whiskers, on the other hand, refused to eat. No matter how many times Lauren called him, he denied her. Why was Whiskers acting differently? "Fine then, starve," she says. Later that night, Lauren gets into bed, repeats the events from last night with the same hypnosis meditation video, then passes out. Then, when the video reaches the 6-hour mark, Lauren jumps out of her bed. "Whiskers," she yelled, "why the hell would you do that?" Lauren's cat hissed and growled at her when he smacked her phone onto the floor. This made such a loud noise that anyone would have woken up. Lauren, though, wasn't sure if she was seeing things, but Whiskers' eyes were changing from brown to green, then returned to normal. Whiskers groaned in pain, and his movements seemed to be hindered. "Oh, what's the matter, my baby?" she says, feeling awful that she shouted at him. Then her attention moves from the cat to the phone. When the meditation was at the 6-hour mark, why were the affirmations no longer in English but in Latin? It sounded ominous, this humming and mumbling speech that created a feeling of unease. Lauren picks up the phone and pauses the video immediately. She then leaves a comment on the video. "Hey guys, anyone else reached the 6-hour mark? What's being said in the video? I don't seem to like it and it just sounds creepy." She closes the video, exits YouTube, and holds Whiskers in her bed. Meanwhile, the person running the channel had deleted her comment within seconds. 1 week passes and Lauren never uses any affirmation videos or sleep hypnosis meditations. However, subconsciously, the woman whispers and repeats everything that was said in the video, including the Latin part. Whenever she did so, Whiskers hissed and growled at her. This tune became a mantra that she uttered those words over and over again. In her shower, in the bed, in the kitchen, while eating, everywhere. Then, on Halloween night, she witnesses what true horror really is. She wakes up in the middle of the night, feeling that same tiredness consuming her body. "Whiskers," she calls out, "where did you run off to now?" From the corner of her eye, she sees a large shadow walking past her window, though it couldn't be Whiskers because it walked like a human. When Lauren got dressed to go outside just after midnight, she hears growls and a vicious fight between a cat and a dog. Horrific sounds, hearing the flesh being torn and chewed. She fumbles with the back door keys, unlocks the door and storms out, hoping that Whiskers wasn't mauled. To her surprise, or shall I say shock, it was the opposite. The neighbor's dog lay dead in her backyard, ripped apart in the most brutal way possible. Whiskers sat on the back fence, but not like a cat, rather like a human. The black cat's eerie smile was so wide that its jaw seemed to be broken. Blood dripped from its sharp teeth as it licked its paws. Its bright green, glowing eyes were fixed on Lauren. Whiskers stands on the fence in an upright position, shrinks its body down to the normal cat size and then runs away. Lauren runs inside the house, trembling with so much of fear that she feels her chest tightening. She then calls the SPCA to report the mauled dog in her backyard. When Lauren did her research afterwards, it turns out the Latin words that she was uttering had opened up her cat to possession. These words were an incantation used by a cult trying to resurrect their demon witch. This demon witch was the deity who was burned alive more than 500 years ago on Halloween. The more black cats opened up for possession, the more vessels she has to switch to when their bodies perish. Lauren sat on her bed trying to figure out which is more frightening, knowing Whiskers was no longer a cat but a demon witch possessing its body, or not knowing which hypnosis videos you are listening to on YouTube that have dark practices hidden within them while you are fast asleep. There are two types of people in this world, one that is humble in success and one that is boastful. Francine was part of the latter since winning the lottery. Whether it was at her parties, conferences, small get-togethers at friends' houses, her arrogance and conceited mannerisms rubbed people the wrong way. Hence, when her body was found on the bathroom floor with blood all over the sink, and with her husband still missing, the list of people that hated her was nothing far from short. But when the young woman died, she had taken a deep and dark secret about the salon down the street to her grave. When Francine had a Halloween party to host that night, all the salons were fully booked. Now maybe this was poor planning on her part, or maybe Halloween this year had way more customers in salons. Though there was a hairdresser she used to visit before winning the lottery, Miss Van Dyke, but Francine hated going by her. Not that her service was expensive or her skills were lacking, rather it was the experience of sitting in the chair. Whenever the salon cape covered her clothes, Francine would always feel a prick on her shoulder, the same spot every time. She told Miss Van Dyke numerous of times to change the cape or at least fix the sharp point on the Velcro. Furthermore, she hated how the salon looks during October. Now fair enough, it may be Halloween month, but the string of eyeballs around the mirrors, ears hanging from fan blades, and blood-tainted countertops were rather extreme decorations. Hence, when Francine and her husband had visited Miss Van Dyke as their last resort on Halloween, she hoped the hairdresser would have sorted out the issues. The filthy rich, egotistical woman had also hoped that no one saw her walking into the lowly salon at the quiet ends of town. Miss Van Dyke was a middle-aged woman donned in a dark witch outfit with pale makeup and long nails. Warmly, she welcomes Francine. The other hairdressers too dressed up as witches, like from Charmed, the old TV series. Francine barely smiled at them. She looks at the decor of the salon in disgust and then sits down. To her surprise, not only was the salon empty, but the sharp poking sensation of the cape never changed. Now Francine or anyone else for that matter would never voice that. Not when she had 2 hours left for a party, and certainly not risking her hair to be ruined by Miss Van Dyke. While the styling and cutting of hair was taking place, Miss Van Dyke had to endure the boastful annoyance from her customer. Usually one would keep quiet when winning the lottery, but not Francine. Though her husband was the opposite, and he wanted it to be a secret. When she saw that her hair was almost done, she passes remarks of how the salon needed improvement and how younger talent needed to cut hair, hinting that Miss Van Dyke and her hairdressers were too old. Now Miss Van Dyke never let those words hurt her, because if any customer had an issue with her, she would always find a way to rectify it. Some time passed and Miss Van Dyke had done a spectacular job with the woman's hair. Fancy upstyle with curls and layers here and there, yet she received no praise from Francine. When the cape was removed from her, it pricked her once again, but harder this time, with spilled droplets of blood. Francine was angered by this and threw the money on the counter and said, "You are lucky that I have a party to host, or I never would have come here." She then proceeded to spit on the floor and storm out. Her husband, with his white hair and a fancy silver watch, stands there embarrassed and ashamed but doesn't say a word. Miss Van Dyke gives him a warm smile while the other hairdressers comfort her. Later that night, after hosting a truly grand Halloween party in the neighborhood, Francine and her husband had cleaned up by themselves. Such a pity that money couldn't buy her real friends. Francine's husband was furious with her with how rude she was at the salon. "Money changed you," he said. He felt bad. You could see it on his face before storming out, heading towards the salon to make things right. Exhausted and prideful, she had a relaxing shower before bed. 5 minutes past midnight and her husband never returned yet. With the white towel wrapped around her head, she walks towards the bathroom mirror, staring deep within, searching for something in her eyes. Francine notices tiny pimples popping up on the iris. Her eyes were infested with these pimples that got larger every time she blinked. Then she tries scratching them by digging her nails inside her eyeballs. While blood sprayed out with the excruciating pain that followed, she just wanted the itching to stop. 15 seconds later, Francine's left eyeball pops out of the socket and falls into the sink. She stumbles her way towards her bedroom, but slips on the blood-covered bathroom floor and falls on her back. Then, these tiny holes appear on her skin. So many that blood shot out from her entire body, like a punctured milk bag leaking from all directions. Meanwhile, Miss Van Dyke sat in her dark, spooky basement, holding a doll in her hands. An old, creepy doll that had Francine's real hair and her blood inside. This doll was poked with a long needle over and over again until there was no place left to poke. Van Dyke's fellow hairdressers sat next to her with evil smiles plastered on their faces. With high-pitched giggles, they stir a hot bubbling soup in a large cauldron made of cast iron. And inside the cauldron were fingers, toes, nails, arms, hands, legs, eyes, and hair. White hair with a fancy silver watch. The soup was now at a low simmer while they cooked Francine's husband, slow and easy. Halloween was very special to these hairdressers. The dark outfits, pointy hats, and fancy medieval brooms were more than just costumes and accessories. This was the one night they would not have to hide in the shadows. Francine should have known better not to anger someone with access to her hair, blood, and saliva. After all, Miss Van Dyke and her hairdressers were real witches. For 5 years in a row, there was a Halloween serial killer known as the Dollmaker. Every night on Halloween, he would murder 5 people, no more, no less. Then he would send clues to the police like a treasure hunt, making them search for the victims. However, saying that his methods were gruesome would be an understatement. The Dollmaker would sew the mouths of his victims and enclose them in porcelain dolls with their real clothing. Then he would mail an envelope with the victim's nails inside, helping the police identify the victim since they were hopeless in catching him. But for the last year, the Dollmaker got tired. He got bored. So he decided to do something daring. He called in and gave them the location of his hideout, an old creepy underground room near the abandoned train station. The Dollmaker says that he killed 5 more people this Halloween and would happily turn himself in if they could solve his final clue. You have 24 hours, and if you can bring them back the way that I found them before Halloween ends, then I will surrender. While everyone else stormed out of the police station, the detectives working the case took a moment. They spoke among themselves and said, "Why does his voice sound so familiar?" They walked down a dark, windy underground tunnel that led to the Dollmaker's hideout, an old stuffy room with a dim fluorescent light flickering the entire time. But it wasn't the light that spooked out the police, rather what was inside the room. 50 dolls were occupying the room, either on the floor or on wooden shelves. They were small, no longer than the length of an average forearm, but boy did they look creepy. They had no eyes, just deep, dark, hollow eye sockets that seemed to be an endless supply of emptiness. With black lipstick smudged on their mouths, some dolls gave a creepy smile while most of them were expressionless. Furthermore, there was an old music box playing an eerie, ominous tune in the background. The police walked through another door leading to the back room. They see 5 life-size dolls that looked creepier than the rest. These dolls had real hair and clothing, with human eyes and disfigured smiles. So 5 victims and 5 human-sized dolls. No-brainer, right? Wrong. When the police carefully removed those dolls, they inspected it thoroughly. The hair was used to identify the victims, but they weren't enclosed within the dolls. So where were the victims? Maybe there was a secret room they didn't see. Maybe the clue had a double meaning. Then the phone rings back at the precinct. The Dollmaker laughs for 30 seconds straight. Now, unlike movies where the suspect needed to be on the line for a certain period of time to trace the call, it doesn't work like that in reality. As long as a connection was made, they could trace the call. However, the location the Dollmaker was at never made sense. How could the call be coming from inside the precinct? When the hysterical laughter ended, he told them it won't be that easy. The Dollmaker felt insulted they would think he would hide the victims inside the human-sized dolls. When the police frantically checked around the precinct, they found no one in the building besides the staff that worked there. The detectives went back to the dollhouse with a canine unit. What were they missing? Then the German Shepherd went crazy, snuffing uncontrollably with his snout traveling in all directions. The dog grabs one of the dolls and rips it to shreds. When the police tried stopping the dog from destroying evidence, they saw what was inside. 10 fingers. Slowly, they look around the room in sheer horror, realizing where the victims were. 5 victims, 50 tiny dolls, and 10 body parts in each. That's why he told them to bring the victims back the way he found them. The police would have to rearrange the dismembered body parts like fitting jigsaw puzzles together. No one would have suspected the victims to be stuffed in tiny dolls like that. Horrific, inhumane, and disturbing. Yet, there was no rhyme or reason as to why the Dollmaker did this. How and why he killed the victims remained a mystery since he never did turn himself in. Next year Halloween, there were no reports of missing people or homicides for that matter. However, the 5 inspectors that worked the case last year had all received a doll on their doorstep at midnight. No one really knew what happened to the Dollmaker. The phone calls, the creepy dolls sent to random people, and the strange clues sent to the police had come to an end. Now here's the really strange part. The 65-year-old janitor working for the police station died in a terrible accident when the vehicle knocked him outside the precinct, and in his pocket there was a cash receipt of 5 dolls being purchased from the toy shop down the street. The same 5 dolls that were delivered to the inspector's doorsteps. Since his death, the calls had stopped. Halloween was known for everything supernatural. Witches flying on broomsticks or turning themselves into black cats, werewolves howling in the distance, and ghosts wandering free. Yet none of that is frightening. Not compared to humans, at least.